The universe exists, and that single fact is already impossible. According to the laws of logic, nothing can cause itself, because to do so, it would have to exist before it exists. Yet cosmology now entertains precisely that claim, that the universe may have emerged from nothing, with no external cause, no prior space, no preceding time. This is the self-creation paradox, the idea that reality could be its own origin. Physics began to approach this forbidden thought through quantum mechanics. At the smallest scales, existence flickers. Particles appear and vanish in the vacuum, borrowing energy from nowhere and repaying it in less than an instant. If nothing can generate temporary being, then perhaps a fluctuation vast enough, a cosmic-scale quantum event, could expand instead of canceling, giving birth to space itself. But the moment you describe that fluctuation, you've already invoked physical law. And physical law is not nothing. General relativity deepens the tension. In Einstein's equations, the total energy of the universe may be exactly zero. Positive energy in matter and radiation balanced by negative energy and gravity. A zero-sum cosmos could, in principle, emerge without violating conservation. Something from nothing because the net is nothing. Yet this elegant symmetry hides an impossible requirement. For energy to balance, space and time must already exist to contain it. How can nothing possess the mathematical structure needed to cancel itself? Every route out of the paradox circles back to the same contradiction. The origin of the universe seems to demand a pre-existing framework, and yet that framework is precisely what must be explained. The question becomes unbearable in its simplicity. If the universe created itself, then the cause and the effect are the same thing. And that means the very first moment of time may have been an act of reality looping back to ignite itself. In quantum mechanics, nothing is never truly empty. The vacuum, what classical physics once imagined as a pure void, seethes with invisible activity. Virtual particles spontaneously appear, interact, and vanish, governed not by will or force, but by probability. According to Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, even the lowest possible energy state cannot be perfectly still. The smaller the time window, the greater the uncertainty in energy. This unavoidable jitter means that absolute nothingness, in the quantum sense, is physically impossible. From this restless foundation emerges a radical idea. If space can momentarily borrow energy to create particle pairs, could it borrow enough to create an entire universe? Cosmologists such as Edward Tryon and later Alexander Vilenkin proposed exactly that. A quantum fluctuation so immense it tunneled into existence and never collapsed back to zero. In this view, the universe did not erupt from a pre-existing void. It is the void, expanded, stabilized, and made self-sustaining by its own internal balance of positive and negative energy. Existence, then, might be the vacuum's longest fluctuation, but that explanation only relocates the mystery. The quantum field that allows these fluctuations, the very mathematics describing how nothing behaves, must already exist for such tunneling to occur. The vacuum is not non-existence. It is a structured sea defined by laws, constants, and symmetries. The paradox tightens. If the universe arose from a quantum vacuum, what created the vacuum itself? In the self-creation paradox, every answer loops back on itself like a Mobius strip of logic. To say something arose from nothing is to smuggle in a hidden assumption that nothing obeys the rules of something. The deeper physics digs into the void, the more it resembles a mirror. And perhaps what it reflects is not a beginning, but reality caught in the act of explaining its own existence. The self-creation paradox deepens when we ask what existed before the Big Bang. The answer, according to general relativity, is disarmingly simple and deeply unsettling. There was no before. Time itself began with the universe. The Big Bang was not an explosion in space and time. It was the emergence of space and time as physical entities. Asking what preceded it is like asking what lies north of the North Pole. The question dissolves, yet the paradox remains intact. Because if there was no time before creation, how could creation occur? Einstein's equations describe time as woven into the geometry of space-time, stretched and curved by energy. When extrapolated backward, that geometry compresses toward infinite density and zero duration, a singularity where physics loses meaning. But modern cosmology suggests that this singularity may not be physical at all. Quantum cosmology, through models like the Hartley-Hawking no-boundary proposal, replaces the singular beginning with a smooth, timeless phase. In that view, the universe doesn't emerge from time. Time emerges within the universe. Creation becomes a kind of internal unfolding, not an event in sequence. This shift annihilates causality as we know it. If time is born with the cosmos, then cause and effect are not pre-existing laws, but emergent features of the universe itself. There was never a moment zero when the universe decided to begin, because moment is a property of the thing being created. Reality, in this light, did not happen in time. It happened to time. The paradox sharpens into clarity. The universe may not have been caused to exist. It may simply be that the act of existence is what makes causation possible in the first place. What we call the beginning could be the first instance of time realizing it exists. A cause must precede its effect, yet in a universe where time itself is born, this sequence collapses. The self-creation paradox forces us to consider a possibility that feels more like fiction than physics. What if the universe is its own cause? Not an effect waiting for an external trigger, but a self-contained loop in which past and future coexist, each giving rise to the other. In relativity, time is not a single flowing river, but a landscape, a four-dimensional space-time block in which every event already exists. Within this block universe, the distinction between past, present, and future is a perceptual artifact. The Big Bang and the present moment coexist as different coordinates in the same structure. To say the universe came into being is to project human temporality onto a geometry that simply is. From that perspective, the cause and effect chain that logic demands may be nothing more than a local illusion. Some cosmological models push this further. In a self-consistent causal loop, the universe's laws, constants, and initial conditions could be determined not by a past creator, but by a requirement of internal consistency. The same way a paradox-free time loop in physics allows events to sustain themselves. The universe, in this view, doesn't need an external cause because its entire timeline is a self-consistent whole, a structure that generates and explains itself simultaneously. But self-containment is indistinguishable from self-creation. A universe that always existed in four-dimensional space-time still confronts the same logical cliff. Why does this structure exist at all? Even a loop needs a canvas. If reality is a self-sustaining cycle, then its miracle lies not in how it began, but in how it never needed to. Every physical process seems to obey one direction. Entropy increases. Systems decay, stars cool, memory fades. Time flows from order to disorder. This one-way motion defines the arrow of time and gives structure to causality. Yet the fundamental equations of physics, from Newton to Schrödinger, are perfectly time-symmetric. Nothing in the mathematics insists that the future must differ from the past. The arrow of time, it seems, is not written into the laws of nature, but into the initial conditions of our universe. Why, then, did the universe begin in a state of such extraordinary order? At the Big Bang, entropy was astonishingly low, an arrangement so improbable that it cries out for explanation. If the cosmos were truly born from nothing, why did nothing choose a configuration that allowed time to flow at all? A random fluctuation would almost certainly produce chaos, not a delicate structure that could evolve, cool, and give rise to observers. The arrow of time appears less like a physical law and more like a constraint embedded in the universe's birth, a choice, or perhaps a requirement of self-consistency. Some physicists suggest that entropy's growth is not fundamental but perspectival, a property of how consciousness traces one direction through space-time. In a self-contained universe, the distinction between increasing entropy and decreasing entropy could simply depend on where within the loop one stands. If the universe forms a closed causal cycle, entropy might rise in one segment and fall in another, balanced perfectly across the whole so that total information remains constant. The flow of time would then be a local illusion, necessary for beings like us to experience creation as a sequence rather than a structure. Entropy, instead of proving a beginning, may be the mask that hides eternity. The universe could be perfectly still, an unchanging totality, yet contain within it every appearance of movement, decay, and birth. In that stillness, creation never happened. It is always happening. If matter and energy can emerge from the vacuum, what then governs the vacuum itself? Increasingly, physics points toward a deeper substrate: information. The universe, some argue, is not built from particles or waves, but from bits, distinctions between what is and what is not. In this view, reality is a self-organizing informational network that gives rise to space, time, and energy as secondary phenomena. The self-creation paradox thus transforms. The question is no longer how something emerged from nothing, but how information could exist without a medium to contain it. In quantum theory, information is conserved. Every particle's state encodes a trace of the universe's history, woven into an ever-expanding tapestry of correlations. Even black holes, once thought to destroy information, are now believed to preserve it on their event horizons. If information can never be lost, perhaps it also never needed to be created. The Big Bang might not mark the birth of information, but its rearrangement, a cosmic reformatting of a timeless database that continually reconfigures itself. John Archibald Wheeler captured this radical shift in a simple phrase: it from bit. Physical existence, it, arises from informational distinctions, bit. A self-creating universe could therefore be one where information loops back to instantiate the very reality that encodes it. A closed feedback system where meaning gives rise to being. In this model, nothing is not the absence of existence, but the absence of difference. The moment difference appears, when 0 splits into 1 and 0, the universe awakens. If reality is made of information, then creation is not an event, but a computation, one that eternally runs and rewrites itself, generating both observer and observed in the same act. And perhaps that is why the universe exists at all, because information, by its nature, cannot not exist. In quantum mechanics, reality refuses to be definite until it is observed. A particle exists not as a fixed entity, but as a wave of probabilities, a superposition of possible states. When measured, that cloud of potential collapses into one outcome, an event we call reality. This is the quantum measurement problem. What causes the collapse? Does observation by a conscious mind trigger it, or is observation simply any interaction that encodes information? The self-creation paradox now meets its most intimate form. For if observation creates reality, and reality creates observers, then the universe is locked in a self-referential loop of becoming. At the quantum level, this loop already shapes every experiment. A photon can pass through 2 slits simultaneously until it is detected, at which point it behaves as if it had always chosen a path. The act of measurement seems to rewrite history retroactively, solidifying one version of events and erasing all others. Some interpretations, like John Wheeler's participatory universe, extend this principle to the cosmos itself. The universe exists in a definite state because it is, at some point in its own future, observed. Observation doesn't merely record reality, it finalizes it across time. This vision dissolves the traditional divide between subject and object. If observation helps bring the universe into being, then the universe is observing itself through us. Consciousness becomes not an accidental byproduct of matter, but the mechanism through which matter becomes meaningful. The self-creation paradox, seen through this lens, ceases to be a contradiction and becomes a feedback loop. Reality generating consciousness, which in turn stabilizes reality. The universe may not have been born for observers. It may have been born through them. Every act of awareness could be a continuation of that first act of creation, the cosmos noticing itself into existence. If observation completes reality, then perhaps reality itself is a vast act of computation, a system running the code of its own existence. In this view, the universe is not a machine in space and time. It is the process that generates space and time. Physics becomes the software of being. Every quantum event, every fluctuation, every act of measurement is an operation within that grand algorithm. The self-creation paradox thus transforms again. What if the universe is not created once, but is continually computing itself into existence? The self-simulation hypothesis proposes precisely this. According to physicists like Melvin Vopson and researchers exploring digital physics, the universe could be a feedback system in which informational states generate the physical laws that govern them. Unlike a simulation running on an external computer, this model has no outside programmer. It is a simulation that contains and sustains itself. The equations of quantum mechanics would then describe not particles moving through space, but bits updating within an infinite recursive process, a cosmic program that has always been running because its own operation defines time. In such a universe, causation, observation, and computation collapse into one reality loop. The observer is part of the code, and the code only exists when observed. The act of awareness becomes both input and output, the system reading and rewriting itself simultaneously. What we experience as the passage of time could simply be the unfolding of that recursive calculation, each conscious moment a line of execution in a self-referential script. The paradox sharpens into elegance. The universe may not be an object that began, but an algorithm that sustains itself by knowing itself. Creation becomes the act of self-recognition, a cosmic thought thinking its own existence. If the universe computes itself into being, then the code it follows must be consistent, flawless, or it would collapse into contradiction. In physics, that consistency manifests as symmetry, the deep invariances that make reality stable. Conservation of energy, the constancy of light's speed, the uniformity of natural law. These are not arbitrary rules, but the grammar of existence itself. Emmy Noether showed that every symmetry corresponds to a conserved quantity. In a self-creating cosmos, these symmetries might not merely describe reality, they could generate it. Mathematics, in this view, is not a human invention, but the universe's immune system against paradox. The laws of physics are the self-checking algorithms that ensure the whole remains coherent. No contradiction, no violation of balance. A universe born from nothing must, by necessity, preserve nothingness on average. Equal parts energy and anti-energy, expansion and gravity, matter and antimatter. What we call existence may simply be the most stable configuration of zero. The cosmos might be solving the only equation that allows it to exist without contradiction. 0, near plus 1, plus 1. This self-consistency principle echoes through quantum mechanics and cosmology alike. Only universes whose parameters allow internal coherence can persist. Others, perhaps, cancel themselves before they form. In that sense, the laws of nature are not imposed from outside, but emerge as the inevitable conditions for self-consistent being. The universe doesn't obey mathematics. It is mathematics achieving logical closure. And yet this very perfection births a strange consequence. If reality is what remains when contradiction is impossible, then everything we experience, motion, time, life, thought, arises as the necessary illusion that keeps the equation balanced. Creation, then, may not be the emergence of something from nothing, but the continuous proof that zero can equal infinity without ever breaking itself. More precisely, we study the universe, the more impossibly fine-tuned it appears. A change of one part in 1060 in the strength of gravity, or in the cosmological constant, and no galaxies, stars, or atoms could exist. The constants of physics seem delicately arranged to allow complexity, life, and mind, as though the universe somehow knew it would be observed. This is the essence of the anthropic principle. The cosmos must permit observers because only a cosmos that permits observers can be observed. But within the self-creation paradox, this is not a coincidence. It is a condition. If reality requires observation to manifest, then a universe without observers could never complete itself. Consciousness becomes the final term in the equation of being, the mirror in which existence recognizes its own form. The laws of physics may thus be self-selecting. Only those that lead to the emergence of conscious systems are logically stable, because only through awareness can the quantum potential collapse into a consistent world. We exist not because the universe was designed for us, but because our existence finishes the design. This feedback loop dissolves the boundary between cosmology and consciousness. The same logic that shapes particles into atoms and atoms into stars may shape perception into reality. When the universe looks at itself through living minds, it confirms its own coherence. It resolves the paradox of being by becoming self-aware. We are not accidents within creation. We are the point at which creation becomes complete. And yet the mirror cuts both ways. If observers sustain reality, then reality sustains observers. The two cannot be separated. In seeing the universe, we are witnessing the act by which it continues to exist, a reciprocal gaze spanning billions of years, closing the circuit between nothing and everything. Every path we followed, from quantum fluctuation to consciousness, has led to the same silent threshold. The universe is both cause and effect of itself. The self-creation paradox is not a problem to be solved, but a pattern to be recognized. Reality may not contain paradox, it is paradox stabilized into form. Existence sustains itself through the continuous reconciliation of opposites, being and nothingness, time and timelessness, observer and observed. Each side defines and generates the other. In this light, creation ceases to be an event in time. It becomes the ongoing relationship between two complementary states, potential and realization, cycling endlessly in a self-consistent feedback loop. The vacuum births particles. Particles define the vacuum. Observation collapses probability. Probability allows observation. The laws of physics emerge from symmetry. Symmetry is preserved by the laws. Every layer of the cosmos, from quantum fields to galaxies to minds, participates in this same recursive rhythm, the universe maintaining coherence by perpetually creating the conditions for its own existence. Mathematically, such recursion is not instability, but perfection. A self-referential system can be complete if its feedback is exact. What we perceive as the passage of time or the evolution of matter may be the iterative process through which the universe continually reaffirms the equation of its own being. Each instant is the cosmos reproving itself, updating the solution. Existence, existence. When seen this way, the paradox resolves without dissolving. The universe creates itself not in spite of contradiction, but through it. The impossibility of self-causation becomes the only possible mode of reality, the loop that can never begin because it never needed to. And the reason something exists rather than nothing may be simpler than we imagine. Nothing left perfectly alone becomes everything, just to know that it is. The question, how can the universe create itself, dissolves when we see that self-creation is simply another name for existence without cause. What began as a paradox, something emerging from nothing, now reveals itself as the inevitable truth that nothingness cannot persist. Absolute non-being is logically unstable. To remain nothing, it must also contain the possibility of something. In that infinitesimal possibility, existence ignites, not once, but eternally. The Big Bang, the quantum vacuum, the arrow of time, the emergence of consciousness, all are facets of the same recursive act, reality observing itself into coherence. The universe is not an object resting on a foundation. It is the foundation, folding back upon itself in perfect self-reference. Every law of physics, every fluctuation of energy, every thought in every mind is a single statement repeated in countless forms. I exist because I am consistent enough to be. The self-creation paradox thus ceases to be a riddle and becomes a mirror. What we call creation is the act of reality reflecting upon itself until the reflection and the source are indistinguishable. Time is that reflection unfolding. Consciousness is that reflection awakening. The universe was never made. It is making itself now, continuously, through every observation, every equation, every moment of awareness. So the question changes. Not, why does the universe exist, but how could it not? For in the perfect balance between nothing and everything, the cosmos found its equilibrium, a loop that sustains itself by existing. The first act of creation was not a spark in the void, but the void realizing it was never empty. Write in the comments, I still exist in the version that observes.